My name is Yasir Ortega. I am an assistant professor at Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. I would like to share with you my blog post related to a reply or a reflection about Mike Mena's article. And the title of this blog post is called Counter Soft Linguistic Terrorism. Introduction. I have been following the work of Mike Mena for a while, as we both shared a passion for metal music. I have found his work fundamentally important as a way to challenge hegemonic ways of knowledge mobilization. His famous YouTube channel is a great example of how academic knowledge can be disseminated in other non text based forms. Mike Mena is a Mexican American researcher and an assistant professor at Brooklyn College, CUNY. Mike focuses on the ideological perceptions of race and language in the context of American education. Recently, I was particularly interested in one of his articles entitled Soft Linguistic Terrorism 21st Century Rearticulations, in which he briefly discusses the concept of soft linguistic terrorism in the context of racial linguistic ideologies at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley in the United States. Building on Gloria Anzaldua's theory of linguistic terrorism in the 1980s. As I was reading this article, it got me thinking that if there is such a thing as linguistic terrorism, there must be a way to challenge these terrorist ideologies as counterterrorism. Although the word, quote, terrorism might look and sound cringe-worthy for some, I understand how language can be weaponized and used by different actors, such as political organizations, religious groups, nationalistic movements, or state institutions for the purpose of intimidating and or minimizing a sector of the most marginalized populations in society. As such, in this blog, in this blog post, I hope to elucidate that what Mike has argued and also provide a way to counter these terrorist mentalities. Soft linguistic terrorism. Mike's work on linguistic terrorism focuses on the rearticulation of racial and linguistic hierarchies through soft linguistic terrorism in the Rio Grande Valley. This form of linguistic terrorism relies on incentivization and ideological recruitment to enforce racial linguistic hierarchies. Mena explores how linguistic registers, like the concept of standard language, quote, perpetuate racial linguistic and impact individuals' experiences, particularly in educational settings. He emphasizes the importance of understanding and challenging these representations of language to promote inclusivity and equality. According to him, soft linguistic terrorism is a term that describes how ideologies of linguistic standardization have been rearticulated in the 21st century to oppress and marginalize certain groups of speakers, especially Chicanos and Latinx. He argues that unlike the original concept of linguistic terrorism, which was coined by Gloria Anzaldúa in 1999 and involved physical and psychological violence, soft-linguistic terrorism relies more on incentivization and ideological recruitment, which create the illusion of consent and choice. However, the underlying goal of soft-linguistic terrorism is still to enforce white middle-class monolingual norms and to erase the linguistic and cultural diversity of the speakers. Mena uses a linguistic anthropological approach to analyze ethnographic interviews with students and faculty at the University in South Texas, where Anzaldúa first identified linguistic terrorism in the 1980s. He shows how racial linguistic ideologies shape the perceptions and practices of bilingualism, language learning, and academic success in this context. He also demonstrates how soft linguistic terrorism operates through various discursive strategies such as standardization, commodification, naturalization, and erasure. One important aspect about the work is that It contributes to the field of educational linguistics by providing a critical perspective on the power dynamics and social inequalities that are embedded in language policies and practices. He also offers some suggestions for resisting and challenging soft linguistic terrorism, such as promoting bilingual education, fostering linguistic awareness, and creating spaces for linguistic empowerment. Counter soft linguistic terrorism. I expand on his suggestions to challenge soft linguistic terrorism effectively with a possible, quote, counter linguistic terrorism pedagogy, in which educational initiatives are purposely designed to dismantle the underlying racial linguistic ideologies and empower students by validating and amplifying their linguistic identities. Such counterterrorism approaches will require a combination of curriculum design, classroom activities, and broader pedagogical strategies that actively challenge and transform the dominant linguistic norms, as briefly described below through critical humanizing pedagogy, or a CHP. CHP is an educational approach that integrates critical education and humanizing pedagogy to create inclusive, equitable learning environments. CHP emphasizes the development of critical thinking skills, challenging power structures, and promoting social change while prioritizing students' well being and dignity. This approach involves co creating pedagogical practices with students focusing on continuous personal growth, community connection, and future transformation. By addressing both academic and social emotional needs, critical humanizing teaching empowers students to become agents of social change, fostering a sense of belonging and encouraging them to work towards a more just and peaceful society. Here, CHP revolves around three core principles: being, belonging, and becoming. Being emphasizes continuous personal change and growth, encouraging individuals to evolve and reflect on their actions and identities. Belonging focuses on fostering a deep connection with the community, highlighting the importance of solidarity and mutual support. Becoming is about envisioning and working towards a better future for all, empowering students to become agents of social change who strive to create a more just and equitable society. These principles create a holistic educational approach that nurtures both individual development and collective well being. Therefore, countering linguistic terrorism is about the pedagogical actions and strategies that aim to resist and challenge the oppressive and marginalizing effects of soft linguistic terrorism. Countering this mindset, therefore, implies the integration of courses or units within educational practices that critically examine the history and impact of linguistic standardization, language ideologies, that critically examine the history and impact of linguistic standardization, language ideologies, and their ties to colonialism and white supremacy. As Mena has already posited, this can include studying and exploring the intersections of language, identity, and power. As researchers and educators could potentially develop interdisciplinary work that combines linguistics, sociology, history, and cultural studies to provide students with a holistic understanding of how language functions in society and of the consequences of soft linguistic terrorism. Adopting a critical humanizing pedagogy that sees students as whole persons with unique identities, experiences, and potential is key to countering soft linguistic terrorism. Teachers can model these values by creating a supportive classroom environment, recognizing and validating students' diverse backgrounds, and encouraging critical thinking about societal norms and power dynamics. In the end, CHP can help facilitate classroom discussions that allow students to explore and debate linguistic norms, the concept of a standard language, and social implications of linguistic choice through critical analysis of media, literature, or everyday interactions that highlight linguistic hierarchies. Integrating these counter-terrorist actions into a cohesive education strategy can effectively challenge and dismantle the ideologies of soft linguistic terrorism, empowering students to embrace and take pride in their linguistic identities while promoting a more just and inclusive educational environment. In the end, utilizing this approach promotes empathy, respect, and a commitment to social justice, aligning closely with the principles of collective agency and responsibility. Collective agency and responsibility. If the idea of soft linguistic terrorism relies on ideological recruitment to enforce racial linguistic hierarchies, then countering these ideologies might require incorporating ideas of solidarity into cultural and linguistic pedagogical practices that can serve as powerful tools for moving beyond the binary divisive mentalities, such as those embodied by soft linguistic terrorism, towards creating a more just, inclusive, and enriching world. These concepts emphasize the importance of collective well being, mutual respect, and coexistence of diverse identities and languages in a shared space. Here, elaborating on the principles of CHP, I provide key ideas that can be integrated into pedagogical and research actions. Collaborating learning. Design classroom activities that promote collaboration over competition. Group projects, peer teaching, and cooperative learning models can help students build a sense of collective responsibility and mutual support. For example, multilingual groups could work together on projects that require contributions from each member's linguistic or cultural backgrounds, fostering an appreciation for diversity and interdependence. Solidarity projects. Develop curriculum units focused on social justice and solidarity, where students engage in community-based projects. These projects could address local issues such as linguistic marginalization, racism, or economic inequality, allowing students to see the impact of solidarity in real-world contexts. This not only teaches the value of solidarity, but also empowers students to be change agents and their communities. Inclusive classroom environments. Create classroom spaces that celebrate and normalize the coexistence of multiple languages and cultures. This can include multilingual signage, cultural celebrations, and the incorporation of diverse cultural practices in daily routines. For instance, starting the day with the greetings in different languages or incorporating cultural rituals into classroom activities can foster a sense of well-being. Dialogic pedagogy. Adopt a dialogic teaching methods that encourage open, respectful dialogue among students from diverse backgrounds. Understanding of others thrives in environments where differences are not just tolerated, but engaged with through thoughtfully. Dialogic pedagogy involves facilitating discussions that allow students to express their views and learn from one another, helping to build a deeper understanding and appreciation of diverse perspectives. Reflective practice. Encourage students and educators to engage in reflective practice where they regularly reflect on their own beliefs, biases, and behaviors in relation to others. This practice helps build self-awareness and fosters a deeper commitment to living out the values of human relations and in everyday actions. Empathy and perspective taking. Implementing activities that promote empathy and perspective taking, for example, or for instance, role-playing exercises, simulations, and collaborative storytelling can help students step into the shoes of others and understand different cultural and linguistic experiences. This builds emotional intelligence and the ability to navigate diverse social environments with sensitivity and respect. I believe that by introducing CHP along with these principles of collective agency and responsibility into all aspects of education, from curriculum design to classroom interactions and community partnerships, educators can help build a world where linguistics and cultural diversity are not just tolerated, but celebrated. Not only does this approach counter the divisive effects of soft linguistic terrorism, it also lays the groundwork for more inclusive, compassionate, and interconnected society. So, in the end, this proposed model towards countering linguistic terrorism, Figure 1, hopes to be an entry point that provides a new perspective on how we as educators can rethink our pedagogical practices in search of an intercultural and decolonial education. As Unamuno and Liberali have posited, we need to start listening a new way, in a new way, a listening that challenges the hierarchies imposed by coloniality and open space for new ways of knowing and being in the world. I invite readers to reach out to me, whether they have already created such activities or whether they seek to develop linguistic activities using the CHP model through collective agency and responsibility. I hope you have enjoyed this blog post and I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you and have a great, wonderful rest of the day today.